I'm asking, should there be limits on people's right to protest? I'm joined now by former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, thank you very much for joining me. What's your view on this? Where do you stand with this?
Well, I mean, there are probably two separate, rather baffling aspects to why anybody should object to this. The first one is that they said, I've heard the lefties, they are all specifically, by the way, socialists. I've heard them all complaining that, in fact, the police don't need these powers. They definitely do need these powers. If you just read what any of the chief constables have said today, what is not clear to them is what they can do and when they can do it. So you get that bizarre position on the M25 at regular places, especially near where I live. I live out in Weybridge. So on junctions 10 or 11 or 9, it's been a nightmare. And what happens, these people turn up with these abilities to climb up onto gantries. And once they get up there, then all the traffic has to stop. And so the police officers see the people there, don't act against them, and only act when they actually get up on the gantry. Now, under this legislation, they can act before the actual massive protest starts, when you know something's going to happen. For instance, if you see somebody with a knife walking through Soho and you think that they're going to stab somebody, you can arrest them. This is exactly the same with these kinds of protesters. And the idea that walking down the middle of the road is not something that you can specifically act against because the police haven't been acting against it, I've no idea why, right, then is absolutely mad. So this is a great piece of legislation. You know, these rather strange people who seem to have a lot of spare time on their hands, presumably being funded by the taxpayer through their benefits payments, right, seem to be able to work out fresh ways of causing trouble all the time. But in this case, I see a whole load of their alleyways being locked down. That legislation about the tunnelling, what a fantastic idea that is, because people have been doing that. Now, to my mind, I can remember, it must be 30 odd years ago, since they first started doing that. So I'm delighted that that's been shut down. I don't feel sorry for the protesters. They can still carry on protesting. But what they've got to know is that they're going to get arrested for doing it. At the moment, it's a free shot.
Well, listen, I can also bring in environmental activist Jeff Gazzard, and former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, is still with me too. OK, Jeff, well, you know, what's wrong with this legislation? Surely, you know, you're allowed to protest. It's not stopping you from protesting, but it's just saying some of the tactics that you employ will be criminalised.
Well, they are at the moment. You can arrest people crossing the road for obstruction. You can do that already. I doubt, in fact, having scanned the news, that Kelvin can find more than one senior police officer who's actually backed this. I've looked at all the media this morning, and there's only been the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. And it's
That's not true.
Hang on, Kelvin. It's a nonsense to suggest that our police, our intelligence services, undercover police officers, all of whom will be scrutinising every aspect from breakfast to nightcap of all of these protesters, don't know what's going on. That's effectively what you're saying. And it would require a degree of clairvoyance from a detective or a police officer to know in advance what an environmental protester is going to do. So, I mean, you'll remember, Kelvin, you know, because you've got a good memory, Doris Stokes and her ability to forecast a future which fell over every opportunity because she couldn't even ghostwrite her own biography. So protest is a long and honourable tradition. If it doesn't disrupt, there's no point. Now, the issue here is, if you want to stop protests, I've got 110% perfect solution. Sit down with the protesters, look at their demands, work out a sensible, pragmatic timetable for implementing them. Job done.
Well, listen, Kelvin, he's got a point. It is a bit Minority Report-esque, isn't it? I mean, they're predicting you're going to do it. They could get that wrong.
Well, they haven't got that wrong. By the way, just to correct, I know that your other colleague there may not like facts, but in fact, the guy who actually has come out 101% in favour of it is the National Police Chiefs Council lead for public order and public safety, Chief Constable B.J. Harrington. You can't get higher up than that, than Mr. Harrington. So let's just just dismiss the idea that police officers aren't 1,001,000% behind this. On the other issue of protest, I am not in favour of protests where ordinary people are driving to work because a load of barn pots have decided for some inexplicable reason that oil is the number one devil in the world. I am not in favour of having any law that stops them doing it before it disrupts me going to work, before a plumber gets to work, before a nurse gets to work, before a doctor gets to work. I'm 101% in favour.
So you're against road accidents then, and road works and congestion caused by the overuse of roads and people not willing to get on the train to go to work.
Really? So you're against cars, are you? Really? Right. Well, that really is the end. Right. Men against cars. Honestly, we're just fine with cars.
Let Jeff finish, Kelvin.
Kelvin, there's regular disruption on the roads. You face it every time you drive. It's caused by one person in 13 foot of slowly rusting metal. And the answer to the issue here is, well, the Peasants' Revolt wrong? Were Chartist protesters wrong? Was the Peterloo massacre, the people who were 13 miles away killed by a militia, in the 19th century? Were the suffragettes wrong? What is an acceptable form of public protest then, do you think?
Well, you can still protest.
I think you have to go back way into history to find anything that supports your argument. And right today, I would say people had more rights through the power of social media than through politicians in order to get their way. You haven't got support in this manner, so you literally get together a half a dozen of nutbums and try and destroy the ability of ordinary people to go about their business. That moment has now come to an end.
Listen, thank you so much.
Well, it hasn't.
We're going to have to leave it there. I'd love to talk to you both for ages. This is a great discussion, but running out of time. Kelvin Mackenzie, former editor of The Sun, and also Jeff Gazzard, environmental activist.